Okay, I think we will be going live now. YouTube should start speaking in the background automatically. All right, I think we are live.
Hello everyone. This is our 22nd session. Welcome everyone. I think we have been on and off a little, somehow it has, a lot of us are got up in a lot of things. So I should apologize for the irregularity which we are in. But today, as to compensate all of that, we have come up with a very interesting topic. So, you know, s- somehow we are coming out of the clutches of COVID, and it is time that we go back and reopen our schools, our colleges. So I and Saurav were just discussing that we should discuss what has happened, like in times when students were away from school and colleges, how it has impacted them, and how do we reimagine schools when they reopen after COVID. So this is our topic for today. So Saurav, what do you think? What do you think? When students were away, they were inside homes. There were a lot of issues and they wanted to go to school, they could not, they could not meet their friends, they could not play. So what has been the impact on students for because of this COVID?
So first of all, I mean, thank you, Priyank, for that nice introduction, and Happy New Year, everyone. This is our first session of 2021. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, so yeah, see, I think it's a very human thing that we adapt quickly, and we have also, I think, talked about this before, that we underestimate our children a lot. Children are much more resilient, much more adaptive, with more clear thinking than adults do. So when they understood, okay, it is lockdown, we have to stay inside. So they understood, okay, we have to stay inside. So I personally think that children have definitely adapted to the fact. In fact, just before this session, we were talking about, you know, my class in the morning. I taken a class in the morning with 700 students. And that is the first time
Mm.
I'm addressing such a huge class. We were continuously, I mean, I was using two devices, continuously interacting on the Zoom chat as well as the Telegram chat. And 700 people typing at the same time can become chaotic. But trust me, it is. But somehow, for some reason, all the students were quite patient. They were quite understanding of the limitations of an online class as well as the positive impact of an online class. So I personally think that students are quite resilient. Just how they adapted during COVID-19 lockdown, I think they will just take maybe a couple of months to go back to the regular old way, if the regular old way is implemented.
Interesting. So I was thinking, let's just try to break it down in different subgroups. So let's say one factor I'm thinking of, that I've listened to a lot of students telling me how the experience of girls and boys have been very different. For instance, girls inside homes in a lot of places have actually had felt a lot more longing for the school than boys, and there have been cases where they have assumed assumed responsibility of the house because they are at home. If there is a device in the house, it belongs to the male child. If there is a preference there in terms of giving the opportunity to the male child or the female child, then again it goes to the male child. So considering one factor, girls, another factor, age, students being young, students being older students, how has living inside the four walls been impacting younger children and the older students. Then another I think of is settings, like how has it impacted in rural places, semi-urban, urban poor, or let's say urban elite. So how has been the experience in all these different categories? What do you say?
I think, Priyank, definitely these different factors have had um, implications on the experiences that different students have had. Um, Adult students, I think, more or less, they kind of settle down. the moment their tuition classes started again. All right, not adult students, I mean older students. So because all of us know that the tuition classes became more professional online before the school classes could. Secondly, a lot of small towns in India, there was social media video as well, where students were actually going to the tuition teacher's house and still studying. So a lot of them, I think, could clearly and very quickly adapt to what was happening. One thing that I have heard from a lot of my mentees and students is the fact that to compensate for loss of productivity, I would say, or lack of studies, the school has been giving students a lot of projects,
Mm-hmm.
because they couldn't teach them properly. So, technically, all the homework they cannot do. The children can just say, well, I didn't understand because there was no proper class, so I can't do this homework. But what the school did was, in return, they gifted them a lot of silly projects. I would call them silly. Why? Because one of my students who is in 11th, just completing his 11th, very smart student, wants to be a computer science engineer and working on his coding skills also at the same time. He said, "Sir, I was busy today because I had to complete a maths project, and today was the last day for submission." And I asked him, "What was the project about?" He said, "We had to print out the uh, the photo or the face of Albert Einstein. All right, just the outline, black and white outline, and then we had to fill that outline, fill his face by writing all the maths formulae that we have learned so far." That was a maths project, and this is not about this is from a very very expensive private school in Delhi. All right, so so those kind of things, definitely, I mean, the school tried to compensate, I would say, but couldn't succeed. Talking about younger kids, and kids from, let's say, underprivileged backgrounds, let me take it one by one. Younger kids, they are restless, they wanted a lot of space. They did not enjoy, to be honest, and it was a big burden on both the parents and the teachers. Although I did a session a few weeks ago with counselors from schools, a couple of them in Delhi, one in Mumbai, and so on, wherein one from Lucknow, and one from Mumbai, wherein we discussed how they managed primary school students' education. And they said that we had to really reinvent ourselves, teachers said. But at the same time, because with the help of the parents' cooperation, they could do that. Children finally understood the activities that were given to them. They could make them dance a lot. They made them sing a lot. So when they got involved in those activities, then children's attention span increased. Thirdly, the third part, the underprivileged students. So um, we have a maid who comes to our house for cleaning, etc. And I was just asking her the other day whether her child, who's I think 5 or 6 years old, he keeps coming to our house. I said whether he's going to school or not. She said, "Well, the schools are not open yet, but I'm sending him to tuition." So uh, people are trying to manage their children's education somehow. Well, that is from my side, because that is the only source of information that I have. I can't really comment on how things must have been going on in the rural areas and municipal schools, etc. What do you think about this?
See, I think there from my end, I think there has been something very interesting happening. I'll tell you how. For instance, if you talk about rural setting, now in rural setting, most of the places people have. It's not that Corona has done a lot of havoc. It's not like that. People have. It is in the cities that the major problem has been. But more or less, even if there was a lockdown and people had to stay indoors, so people, because they have space, it is easier. you know they still have a space of their own. They have fields, there's large spaces. So in that respect, I think it has been a lot easier in the rural settings. But when I shift a little to the semi-urban, it has become a little difficult. Now when you shift to from semi-urban, you shift to urban poor. Now this is where I think it has been the most difficult. not even in the, so it's not like the chain goes from rural easier, then difficult in semi-urban, urban poor, and no, it somehow, I what I have found is that in the urban poor setting where the students go to low budget private or public schools, that has been a major there has been a major problem there because of one huge space constraint, huge space constraint. Because you live in jam packed places, and you are asked to remain inside of you. It's like a room where inside there's a kitchen, so it's not even an arcade. So remaining inside that four wall, which is literally a four wall, and on top of that, the situation of the schools itself has been so horrible in these spaces because they can't afford tuition, they can't afford going to an online tuition anywhere, and schools have done a horrible job here because there has been no direct guideline from the ministry that you have to open schools here. In terms of that, you have to, there has been some sort of worksheets being flown around. So there is Diksha app which has come in, and these worksheets can be given to students, but there has not been a lot of, you can also blame it on the lack of teacher training which has been in the past. The teachers don't even understand these apps or these online models and everything. So that is the one big factor. But the experience of teacher in the urban poor has been so bad, I would say, that and particularly when it comes to younger students, and then you particularly when it goes to girls, to female gender. So that respect, I would say, you know I just can't imagine the kind of mental health impact it has on students. Students like to move, younger students especially, they like to play around, move around, and everything. And you're just sitting inside your house. You're not allowed to go outside for reasons which are not in your control. And how will now let's think, how will students come back to school if a student has not, let's say there's a 5-year-old kid who went to the school, saw it for 6 months, and then was asked to remain inside the house. When he or she goes back to the school, how will they even think of school? What will they prefer it? Will they not prefer it? In terms of understanding the importance of school, and we also don't know if it will be a full week school, maybe 3 days remote, will it be blended model, flipped classroom model. This is a lot of there's a lot of lexicon flowing around the internet, but there are so many doubts. How will we reimagine school when we open again, post COVID? I think i think I don't remember which state government has recently issued an order that the primary classes will reopen from 5th Feb. It just slipped out of my mind. Some state has recently said this, that in February they'll reopen schools. It is, so we now know that it started, you know so what do you think
That
of,
is true.
you know how how
Absolutely,
how do you,
absolutely.
how do you reimagine this space now? Very difficult.
To be honest, I mean, yes, theoretically it does sound different, but to be honest, since we're living in India, and in the beginning of our discussions when we started approaching the new normal education, everyone had the same question in mind. Do you think anything will change? And I stuck to my premise that no, human beings don't change, and this is not going to do anything to us. Yeah, I mean, if I had the data, I don't know where to get this data from, but I have a gut feeling about the data. If I had the data, how many schools have taken up Swayam, National Digital Library, or e-Gyan Kosh, like the government resources, all right? How many schools have taken it up? And how many are using them on a continuous basis? How many students are using it on a continuous basis? I mean, I do have a feeling that it will show that there was an initial spike, then it kind of flattened, and the usage, monthly usage, is not impressive. The reason for that is because people adapted and they were just waiting. So students are supposed to go from 1st February. I get it, but the teachers were already going to school, I think, from November end,
Right.
right? And they didn't change much in their way of doing things. I don't think, and because if teachers are not changing much in their way of doing things, I don't think the schools are going to do so, and the parents basically follow what the school does, and the parents have to abide by that. The students have to abide by that. So I don't think there's going to be a major shift in most of the schools, private or government. There will be some innovator schools. There will be schools who are already planning the use of technology in a bigger way, in a grander way, and they will be doing that in all the major cities and wherever they are placed, because they've invested lakhs and lakhs of rupees, and they maintain IT teams which are taking care of these things. They want to include flipped classrooms. They want to include blended learning. They want to make learning a more holistic process. But how many other schools can we say the same for?
I lost you. Hello.
Hello?
Huh. I
Huh.
lost you.
Okay, from where?
The last bit.
Last bit was like,
Like,
how many other schools can we say the same for? So yes, again, I'm trying to make a prediction without having any data. Well, I'm really sorry for that, but then the next few months will actually tell us how much has changed and how will it change. One true example that I can take is my cousin brother. He runs a small primary school. All right, and they were supposed to launch classes in February 2020, but they couldn't because of the lockdown then. So they are relaunching the classes now. They haven't changed a bit about their curriculum, even a single thing. And the parents are
that
coming back with their children.
in a way that's so scary, no? It's even a thing like COVID, which has jolted the whole education system and told all the stakeholders that there's something which is not working, and you really need to put effort to mend it, transform it, do whatever you can do. And but we are here discussing that nothing will change. But I think what essentially, I keep saying this and keep thinking about this, what essentially will be a big question, that how the student experience as such, in terms of being at home, and in terms of what school is, you know it's not just where a place where you have to learn 6 subjects or 5 subjects. There's a lot more to it. So even if we ask, I did a bit of a study where we were asking students that, what do you miss the most about school? And I don't think there was a huge let alone huge chunk. There's a very marginal chunk which was saying that we missed studying or learning subjects or whatever. It was mostly about peers and teachers. They had a bond with the peers and the teachers. Now they missed their talking to the teachers. They missed being with their teachers. They missed being their peers. So school so essentially, if there is a space where there are some affectionate peers, as well as teachers, who give them that space to be themselves, to explore, to do anything new of that sort, it solves the purpose for them. It doesn't have to be a school. It we can we can rethink on that. We still need a school as such, because we essentially are tagging school with achievement scores. Students go to school because they then get this 10th board mein, they get this much amount of marks, till they get this much, and that is how they essentially go for higher education. But I think the whole experience, what I have observed is that children go to school because they have some bonding with their peers and teachers. You know,
That is very true, and that is what the children miss the most. Um, Another very important aspect, which we also discussed during the session, wherein we had invited the girls from Jahangirpuri, the 10th standard students of Jasleens. Um, they mentioned something very important. Their daily routine, was dependent on the school. It was so dependent on the school, and I think this is true for almost all the students. Doesn't really matter which kind of school they go to in India. The parents and everyone else depended on the school to maintain that routine, that daily routine, that weekly routine. That got disturbed quite a bit, wherein the parents were also at a flux as to what should we do now. The school days were starting late, ending late. They were not sleeping on time, and so many other things, right? So I think that routine is what children definitely missed. Again, apart from obviously the human to human interaction and bonding, I want to really hope that the students have realized that digital communication, uh, how it was perceived pre-COVID levels, pre-COVID time, children were all about it. There used to be parents trying to control that and everything. I think the children right now should have matured a little bit in understanding that digital education is probably digital communication is probably not the best kind of human interaction that you can have. I certainly hope that the children realize this.
Or it is the other way around. It's like children have got into so much of digital communication that they stop doing the outdoor stuff. They like, we are good with this. We after I feel after a certain point of time they miss definitely going out and everything with this thing. But what if students go, after the COVID they are more into their devices and they're like, we want to, they enjoy so much of WhatsApp, so they definitely want to play. But the amount of digital communication which is increased, I don't think it is going to come down. They will not realize that this is not good. I think it will be like they really enjoy it and they want to do more of it. So I think it is counterproductive in a way, no?
So you're right. So I don't think the usage will come down. I don't think the
Hmm.
digital usage, what it has increased to a certain level, it is not going to come down. All right. Because now they suddenly found a lot of validation also, right? Teachers are saying, no, no, use devices. Parents are saying, no, no, use devices. So they found that validation. But what I definitely think is that, as is with the rebellious attitude in most adolescents, if you allow them to do something, then they kind of lose interest in it soon after. So I'm banking on that as well, that they mature up faster. And I think children with the access to internet and technology are definitely more mature than the previous generation anyhow. um, I think that they will definitely think of digital communication or using a device just for what it is. Not for it is not only for entertainment anymore. It is also for studies and work and everything. And the last 6 7 months, they have definitely learned. They have gone through that learning curve where they understand how to isolate their work from their entertainment, from their chatting and socializing. So they must be getting a little bit tired of it. Also, I'm pretty sure.
I think it would be very interesting study to figure out the kind of playtime students had before COVID and post COVID. And I think one of the most wonderful side of experimentation or observation or really understanding kids would be recess. Recess is the only very particular time in school where there's unstructured play happening.
Mm.
There's nobody supervising. Even in physical education or PT periods, it is mostly some elder is there, some teacher, some PT teacher, somebody is there who is supervising, who is structuring the whole conversation and everything. So I think it would be very interesting how researchers pick up this side, the research side, where earlier there was a lot of unstructured play, and and also how races is reimagined by students, one, and also how races is reimagined by schools. Because there is likelihood that recess time will go short, because whenever something non-academic is hampered, is not going according to the plan, recess is the one way which they take off, like which is which doesn't happen. So they'll take time out from the recess period, 10 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever, then they'll give it to math class or social studies class or whatever. And on top of that, thinking in terms of distancing norms, thinking in terms of COVID. So they will be like, you have to do recess but you have to inside class. So these are interesting questions. I don't know.
These are definitely interesting questions. In fact, I have more for you. But then again, Priyank, I mean, before we get into this entire conversation, because I actually would like to know a few things from you. Like, what kind of researches should the researchers and government and organizations invest in right now? After the students come back, what kind of questions and what kind of hypotheses are that we're looking to evaluate? The Indian context matters a lot. I spent my New Year in Goa. there was no corona over there. So yes, police was there talking about social distancing and everything. Everyone had to wear masks. Nobody did. Do you really think that the students are going to follow any kind of norms whatsoever in school? Because they have not been doing that in the marketplaces anyhow.
True. I think, see, I would agree when you're saying that the students are not going to follow distancing norms as such. But what I am thinking is that administrators, if
Hmm.
even if there's a slight spike,
Hmm.
let's say schools are reopened. I know that yesterday, after many days, the number of people who got COVID were more than the number who recovered. So yesterday was the first day when it happened. So we can kind of think of a second sky. But anyway, let's not be too pessimistic here. But so even if there is a slight chances or a likelihood of a second spike, so the only thing, I don't think they'll shut off the schools right away. So what essentially would be done is administrators or teachers, there will be a very straightforward rule that children have to remain indoors and try to, I will not say distancing norms, but no, there doesn't need to be a lot of engagement per se. So essentially it will affect recess. That is what I was trying to point out, that because I associate recess with there's a lot of importance in my heart for it, because I feel that is one space which is very less explored by research scholars, and has a huge potential in terms of understanding kids, because structured environment, if you observe kids, is very different from an unstructured, and this is the only time inside school. Having said that, coming to a former question, when you were asking the what is the essential things in which government should invest in terms of conducting research, I think one thing which has to be kept in mind is, now going forward, if something similar happens, you know going forward, we have to at least first thing, like, think of reimagining the whole thing in terms of that we should be prepared next time. Let's say we have anything else. Viruses are very common anyway. Ebola tha, swine flu tha, ye tha. But anything happens, how do we prepare ourselves better in the face of the pandemic? So having said that, I think it is important for schools and governments to rethink the whole space. How can you make it, for example, if you talk about blended? So blended today is a far reality for a lot of people in India, right? There's no internet connectivity, people don't understand. And the biggest lacuna is in terms of teacher training. There are teachers who were resilient, who faced it, accepted it, and then went on to do wonders with it. No doubt. We have had cases like VR, AI, this and all. It's so interesting, right? But mostly it has been a very daunting task for teachers. They have not had any experience with with respect to teaching kids online and all that. So how do you prepare the upcoming generation, upcoming teachers, to be efficient, proficient in teaching online or using these devices? One, two. How do you reimagine the space to be ready in face of any pandemic? Can you, if today something happens, can tomorrow everything go online? Do you have a structure like that? No. Do you have places where make in India या फिर digital India, those are big names, but अभी तो बहुत दूर है ना. So in terms of placing the infrastructure and making it happen, again a very big question. How long we have to imagine that India will be a digital India?
Yeah.
And
So
very
you
difficult.
you raise some really interesting points, Priyank, over there. So definitely we need a future pandemic, or let's say natural disaster preparedness for our schools and education so that they can continue. That is definitely one area for doing research. I mean, one of the reasons why Hong Kong was so successful in tackling the pandemic and in then engaging in peaceful protests was because they had learned from the SARS pandemic, more than a decade ago. So cases like those now, every school, every district, every state has its own case studies or data available, which should be collected, collated, and utilized. But then, talking about digital India, I have a couple of questions actually. So let me start off with the wonderful article that I read yesterday. I think I'll put it in the description also. It's a 45-minute read, but it's an amazing article uh, about India and it describes India as the country of internet, or the internet country. The reason for that is because of the India Stack. Now, India Stack is short form for the phenomena of a universal payment gateway that we have in India for Aadhaar. Because you, what you first of all did was you created digital identity for everybody. Using that digital identity, then you created a digital payment system for everybody. UPI is the fifth largest payment system in the world today, and I think within a couple of years it will become the second largest after just Alipay or WeChat Pay from China, because of the numbers, right? No other country in the world has done that. Third, so second is now Philippines, Sudan, Ethiopia, certain countries in Latin America, they are trying to implement the same kind of system that India has developed. Create an API. API is for non-computer science people. API is like the key which you can use to talk to any application or any software. So we have one single key available to talk to any bank in India, which is unprecedented. We are doing things which is very localized, and it is really enthusiastic, or really interesting for people who are from blockchain or cryptocurrency backgrounds as well, because that is what it promises. So the question is, using the India Stack, can startups, especially edtech startups, can they come up with very customized education offerings? Just like right now, they have very customized mobile recharge and Amazon Pay and all these offerings to you because you have a unique mobile number and Aadhaar card. Because of that, only you're getting all this. Can we also use that to provide every child his customized curriculum on his or her device? That is something I'm really looking forward to when we talk about digital India.
First of all, I don't think I would be a very right person to answer this question, because my expertise or my understanding of this area is very limited. But having said that, I think whenever we ask can we, it is us who have to make it happen. So
Yeah.
if we believe it can, so it definitely can. So picturing, I think, individualized curriculum. Let's talk about that. I understand that a bit. So if you think of
Actually, my
individualized
next question
curriculum,
is also related to it. Let me just club the question. So then you
okay.
speak. Okay. Next
Okay.
question was basically related to the fact that a lot of students, especially the smart ones, the serious ones, all right, the persistent ones, they have already figured out their own way of learning during the COVID-19. They're not dependent on schools, not dependent on coaching classes, not dependent on people like Byju's. They've already figured out their own way. Going back to school is going to be an obstacle for them. How can they come back from it? Because this is again individual customized learning mechanisms that they've developed for themselves.
But as we discussed earlier, I anyway don't think students really go for those
Study.
subjects. So I think because when you was discussing what should researchers focus on, my second point was this. I think there has to be huge research which has to be invested in terms of what essentially school is meaning for students, which I definitely think it is not those subjects. So if it is something else, what is the priority in terms of what you're giving? When you're focusing, when student is wanting affection, student is wanting peer interaction, student. So if student wants that, and it has some huge, in terms of mental health of student, it has a huge impact, then why don't you strengthen it? There has to be some real rigor in terms of strengthening that aspect. So I think it is good that they have curated their own personalized way of studying different subjects. But again, school is something much more in terms of that. And also for parents, parents, I think, feel hugely liberated when school starts, because they had to take the burden of the child inside home. They had to take care of them. They were very free when the child went to home. They went to their office and they were having fun. जब बच्चा स्कूल से आएगा तब झेलेंगे, अभी तो ठीक है. As younger the kid is, even older, it's very difficult. So that way, I think it is huge liberation. And digital वाली बात, personalized curriculum, yeah. So I think, there is a lot of things which has to happen when, even when we are, even if our goal is or our vision is personalized curriculum. So we are at a point where it is a very far-fetched thing. There are a lot of milestones which will come in the middle, and
What do you think those milestones are?
it is difficult to pinpoint. In my understanding, it will be very difficult to pinpoint all of it. But I would say the very first thing to have a personalized curriculum is, you know, teachers. You are coming to school, and teachers have some understanding of it.
Hmm.
Now the whole system's understanding in terms of stakeholders, in terms of understanding is such that this is your subject, this is your mass, this is the outcome, this is your output, this is what is expected from you. So the culture, the mindset is so deep rooted. It is nowhere near to that. A child could be, for example, a child could be having this subject, or let's think of it this way: if somebody is good in math, let's say, why not that child can be in eighth grade of mathematics, and if he or she is not good in English, then be in third grade of English. Now
So
he or she's
here I have a question, right? I mean, definitely there are systems milestones, like the milestones which the system needs to achieve in order to be well capable enough to offer individualized curriculum. But then technology, the penetration of it, especially during the lockdown, has enabled students, has given them the right and freedom to do it, right? Create their own. Now, again, not everyone has done it. The smart, persistent ones have, and that is where the general problem, according to me, comes from. So, I've been a big fan of constructivism and Montessori method, and if you read case
Waldorf.
studies, yeah, so Waldorf as well. If you read the case studies of World Economic Forum about Estonia's education system and why it is becoming one of the best in the world, is because all these things, all these systems, all these philosophies, they allow the student to choose. To choose what? To choose from a list of resources, right? So first of all is obviously providing those resources. Great. Now I understand our systems are not capable of doing that, but definitely, let's say certain students who have the access and resources, they have these resources available to them now, right? Now the next problem comes: the child has to choose. How will the child choose? Usually it is by trial by error, or experiment, and then if you like it, great, otherwise don't, because human beings are experiential learners.
Child
Now,
chooses by the teacher. He or she
yeah,
likes the teacher, chooses because of the teacher.
absolutely,
Yeah.
in India it does. Now the thing is, definitely that's an issue. Not every child is going to make a decision, first of all, and probably not the right decision also. uh, and that is where the parents get impatient and whatever. But what if we could assess, continual assessments are available, wherein which assess students with a very non-testing, non-academic testing kind of a assessment, wherein you are the system, or the, let's say, the technology is able to assess which resources should be available to make a more make a better choice for like give that choice to the student, so that the student, based, just like you said, maths, if that person's maths is at 8th grade level, but the student is still in 5th grade, the technology should be able to understand that and offer him questions from 8th grade, or the concepts from 8th grade, right? That can be done for individualized curriculum based on certain assessments. But do you think we are at a stage where, let's say, psychometric assessments or educational assessments are qualified enough or capable enough to guarantee certain amount of success with these assessments in this case?
I think there is a huge problem with assessment per se.
Hmm.
And the problem is that assessment have differential impact on students. You know, assessment, if a student gets a mark, it is not that every student get inspired by that mark.
So again, I
So
said non-academic testing, so no marks.
any type,
Uh,
any sort of assessment.
okay.
So I'm saying assessment cannot inspire. For example, a student is not good in maths. Let's say, let forget about any student. I was not good at math when I was in
Hmm.
when I was a third standard, fourth standard, fifth standard. So my mom used to give me benchmarks, like, if you score less than this, you will be beaten. It was like that. So my brother was very good in it. So comparison was always with my brother. So So any sort of assessment inside classroom or non-academic academic would never be able to gauge my ability in terms of that subject, because I was very poor at it. I kind of hated it. Let's put it this way. And that was the only dreadful subject in the whole district. So I used to score very good in other subjects, but math. Now what happened? Since it is so much in, what to say, powerfully tied with the teacher. I'm trying to point that. So when I got a new teacher in my ninth grade, so the whole meaning of math changed. It 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 completely changed for me. I started loving the subject. It became my favorite subject. I got 100 or not 100 in my ninth half yearly. So, that is how a drastic change can come in. The problem with assessment is, I think fundamentally is that it is not, it as I said, differential impact, and it is not inspiring as such. So how do you think there are ways in terms in which academic or non-academic assessment could be interpreted? So the problem is also when you're interpreting assessment, right? Because there are people who have the ability to interpret, and there are very few people who interpret it very good, and put it across to students the way it should be. So interpretation is a problem, but again, as I said, I think you got the point. So it's very difficult.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, ways exist. Psychologists have created non-verbal forms of assessments using objects, using pictures, and so on and so forth. But then again, you also pointed out a very important fact: the interpretation of it, right? What means what? What standard should we follow? If this picture, if you selected this picture, this means this, which again converts into marks only, or some kind of score at the background. Using that score, the algorithm throws this subject at you, and so on. The interpretation becomes very valuable. The only challenge which I see with a little bit of experience in psychological testing is that the interpretation needs to be challenged regularly. Now, how I see this happening in a computer system is, you are providing assessments, non-verbal assessments to a lot of students, and over a period of 6 months or 1 year, you collect this data. I mean, again, this is not an original thought that I'm giving you. This is done in standardized testing. For example, in GMAT, they introduce new sections in the test itself. They are not marked, so your score is not affected because of that. But they use a lot of data points around that section to evaluate whether the questions were good, whether the candidate was happy, or whatever. Similarly, that kind of assessment can take place, and it is evaluating continuously. It is normalizing the scores over a big geographical area, big demographic area, and so on and so forth, to see what works and what doesn't work.
But how do you make it inspirational? Is what I was asking.
Right. So the
How?
inspiration over here. I mean, I'm making a very, very explicit assumption over here. The inspiration, according to me, should come to the student based on the fact that he is getting more of the things that he's naturally able to do and solve if he does certain things, and that I would say that excitement or stimulation of his brain and capabilities should be a sort of incentive, apart from all the human, emotional, social, and emotional learning component of it, because that is something I don't think the computers can replicate that.
I think there's a tool in psychology which is called inventory.
Hmm.
So I think that is very powerful if we want to exploit all of this forte, because if you have an inventory of a child, so inventory is basically for people who don't know about it, is basically having everything about the child as much as possible. Let's say in a file, in a book, wherever. So basically, creating a creating a document of observation with respect to child. So if you see, for example, I'm taking an English class and I find a student doing something else. So one, I get annoyed by it, fine. But if I go and see that below the table the child is solving a Rubik cube, for example, so that has to go in the inventory.
Yes.
That the child is, so assessment may not be able to capture it, but the inventory can, observation can. So I think that the beauty about this tool is that if you have a document per se, if you have huge observation list of it over a period of time, and if somebody is able to interpret it and analyze it, huge, it's not an easy task to over a time understand the child and analyze whatever your observations are, how you can, because if for example if I am not good at math, if but I'm good at soccer, I love football, if the teacher is able to associate football with math, maybe then my true potential in math will come out. Up till then it is not.
Maybe.
So yeah, so maybe again, so it is important that how do we create these flexible modules of
Mhm.
uh, getting that data in terms of observation and everything, and giving this child the space where he or she can explore his or her potential, because there's a lot more inside which they themselves don't know, we don't know. So I remember Johari window. I think we are all done Johari window. It's a wonderful exercise for people who are very few people who are watching this or who will watch this. Please go and explore Johari window. Every person has a side where he or she doesn't know. So it basically has four windows. Where one, what you know, what others know, what you don't know, but others know about you. Very interesting. Third, what you know about yourself, but others don't know. And last, what you also don't know and what others also don't. So there is still a bit of every person which nobody knows. So explore, helps
Absolutely. I
you
mean,
explore.
there are so many things which impact the development of a child. That child's relationship with socializing, all right, the child's relationship with taking motivation from nature, the child's I mean, I can keep on increasing the list and all, because it depends so much on the nurturing, right? That is why we go back to the nature versus nature debate again. But then again, I mean, and standardizing all these factors so that you can kind of exclude them from the study is very, very difficult. The other part is stimulating the child with multiple stimuli just to see, okay, if you go with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, which is, well, not scientifically proven, but still, if you theorize about that particular area, and you see, okay, what kind of natural intelligences or multiple intelligences that the child have, you keep stimulating him. Also, though you give him farming tools, you see whether he has green thumbs or not, right? But how many stimuli can you come up with? Because with the rapid change in technology and the rapid change in incentivization of children, especially using social media, you will never really know what is actually working for them or not, right?
Right, right.
One day they see a gaming video and they're all about games and they want to do something about it. But then again, if it is about games, then do you want to develop games and so on and so forth? So there are multiple aspects of it. You ultimately come down to the fact that the child will have to make certain strong decisions in order to go in some certain direction, right? And probably one of the ways is, again, providing that child with enough information to make an informed decision. But then how much information is enough information for a child who wants to learn a lot many other things apart from just about data and stuff? Right?
I think that's very important, but also how many. So the basic ask is how many uh, kind of careers the child can explore, or and also the problem is children used to shift their interests also very quickly. So I remember there was a child who was very passionate about painting. So we had held a summer camp,
Hmm.
and so the children were coming in. So the child started with, so we had told parents that we will not be teaching anything. It is not going to be so one teacher was like, we want them to speak English, this, that, blah. We were like, that nothing of that sort is happening, and it is only the child which will take the lead. We will just guide, felicitate, I'm we'll just guide them. So one child was like very, very passionate about painting, so picked up the colors, started painting, this, that, blah, and we want to help him that okay, explore your interest, you can do this, you can do, why don't you try this. Whenever the child asked, we never was pushing the child in any way. But I think it went on for hardly 2-3 days, and then was like, I don't like painting, shit. and the child
Exactly.
was like and the child was like, suddenly the MFSN turned to, I think he picked up solving puzzles. So I don't know a big puzzle solver's name, but so we figured. So it shifts so so there's a huge difference between painting and puzzle, and in terms of what you're doing, not in terms of using a brain. So I think it shifts so quickly. So
It
I don't
does.
know.
It
It
does.
is.
And that is what our current curriculum is basically based on, right? They have kind of created a system. I mean, it might be solid, it might be based on good foundation, or it might not be. They've just created that at this age, this much academic capability you need to have, or this much knowledge you need to have. Rest you can keep exploring other things. In Asian cultures where academics become more important, so everything is focused towards the academics, which was supposed to be a parallel, I would say, parallel rib cage, which would protect you from, let's say, academic lack of information. But people are just focusing on that itself, because again, assessments become a part of it. The other day, this week, I mean, I reposted an episode of mine with a very special person. Her name is Mickey Chen. She's half Nepali, half Chinese, but has been brought up in Netherlands. All right, so she has this another side to her altogether, which is like multi-ethnic upbringing, and dealing with a lot of other issues which normal children would not deal with, like racism, etc. But so she said something very important. She said, like, back in Nepal, if you are smart, that is not the precondition of your success in life. In the Netherlands, if you are smart, the system is created in such a way that it will automatically funnel you in the best possible places for success. It will give you so many choices that you will be spoiled, right? So again, talking about my friend who's Dutch. He studied in Netherlands, did an exchange program in Japan, fell in love with Japan, moved to Japan completely. All right,
Wow.
did a few things here and there over there. Nothing, I would say, conventional or concrete as people would like to see from a smart guy like him. But at least he had the choice of making his own decisions, learning from his own mistakes, exploring different cultures, learning foreign languages. He had all those opportunities, which a smart person from India or Nepal, I don't think they will even think that as a possibility. For most of the students, smart students, or who are considered smart in India, they will not even think of that such a possibility is available for them.
Yeah, so true. In fact, going back to, and we have discussed so much of stuff, and I was wondering that we had to discuss college also, but I don't think we have time to discuss college because the school has taken so much of time. But I think we will wind up with school only. But going back to what we were discussing, that how do we reimagine school space when post COVID? So I think all of these are very important points. But what also strikes me is, you, as you were saying, that I don't think that anything is changing. It is all going back to the same old schedule. But I don't know, somehow it keeps striking me. How come anything is not changing? How come so much is so much is made bare? The COVID has been able to lift off the cover of so much of wrong which was happening in the system, and it is time that there. So I, in a sort, very hopeful that there will be some aspect which will be picked up, at least, if not anything else, at least preparing schools, both teachers and administrators, and the infrastructure in terms of access to online stuff, making it a more blended. So if you could just give two pieces on blended and flipped classroom, I think people should know, whoever is watching, what are those things. Very important. If a teacher is watching, they can use these new ways of teaching in their classroom.
So, very important point actually, and thank you for bringing back the conversation to the original topic. Blended learning will be there, no doubt about it. The schools are going to exploit certain areas, according to my understanding. Um, let's talk a little bit about flipped classrooms first. That is, I think, the most innovative part of blended learning for Indians, because flipped classroom was not really introduced earlier, wherein the students have to study something on their own, then bring the doubts to class, and the teacher is also prepared to solve those doubts. It allows a lot of personal attention, because you're solving doubts for different students who have different understanding of the subject. Also inculcates the right kind of habits which will be useful in college. So I think schools are definitely going to pick up on flipped classrooms, and it will be really interesting to see flipped classrooms being used in primary schools. Um, why? Because a lot of activities, primary schools in India were more so considered as daycare centers rather than anything else, because the parents would just not have the energy or the time to deal with the students. But I think because the parents are coming back on board, they are involved in their child's education more. That is something we will definitely see. Apart from that, blended learning, I think every school now, at least all the private schools, I would say, have some sort of IT system where they are managing the learning, where they are managing lessons, where the children are able to communicate with the teachers. There is more transparency. Those things will continue. It makes more sense for the schools also. It makes more sense for the students also. The future is going to include a lot of different things, and if you don't have a technological infrastructure in your school, you will be left out, and parents will obviously move out. So it is also, it does makes a lot of business sense also for them.
So we expect to see a lot of PPP models, maybe.
uh I can't comment on government. Again, I would love to see something of the nature of what we have done with the payment system and identity for our country, using that to improve education. When we talk about PPP, I don't think there will be a lot of PPP models. There will be a lot of edtech companies, startups, which will introduce innovative products in markets where they have not been introduced earlier. But again, the charge will be taken up by private players and private schools, and slowly it will percolate into the government ecosystems. Apart from, state governments which are heavily investing in education, like Delhi government, or for that matter, Kerala government as well.
Interesting,
What do
interesting.
you think
I
before we conclude?
I think is somehow there could be huge which could be done in terms of the action which the government could take, but
Mm,
somehow the focus has not been this. Somehow
mm.
it has not done what more could have been done. So I have very few, or let's say limited hope from what could be done in near future, because anything which is talked about in terms of education has hinged around only NEP, and NEP is a document which is so far sighted, which is so much on the ideals. It is. I don't know. It is just because you talk about, you have given a document which is, अरे हम आज तक we have not been able to implement NCF, which came in 2005. Forget about NEP. So RTE took us so many years, and it was so difficult to shift uh, elementary schooling from. So in some states, the elementary schooling was till seventh grade, but RT mandated eight years of free schooling, so they had to shift it to eight. So it was very difficult for that to happen. The governments and everything they had to convince states that it is important RT, so this that, because it is education is in concurrent model, right? The state has the right to reject the policy of the center, but the only way center is able to overpower the state, because the funds are with center. So center can say, I will not fund you if you don't listen to us, we will not fund you. But center can definitely not say that this is something which is and it is a huge country. Yeah, RT is not a reality, just to tell
Mm,
you.
mm.
It is supposed to be a reality, but it is not. And there are so many reasons. Maybe we'll do a separate session for that, why it is not reality. And it is also not, as we say, I'm saying there is a huge benefit of RT, but there are some points of RT which has been in some context not good, like hilly areas and everything. So another for another session maybe done. But having said that, why I digress, I don't even remember now. But I think we discussing all of that. I just want to say that the government has not been very proactive in doing stuff which needed to be done. So if private players come in, and I expect to see PPP taking off, because how do you improve public? You cannot wait for the private to build a system which starts threatening the public, and then the public will think that, okay, it is getting very difficult, we need to do some change. It looks like a Bollywood movie or a South Indian movie,
So
jahan
ideally,
the
you're
hero.
right. Ideally, you're right. We should not wait. Just yesterday, I was watching an interview of Professor Arun Kumar, who is an economist, and he wrote his book, and he talks of the fact that Indian economy is going to shrink by 29% this year. All right, and the government is saying it is going to grow by 11%. So when the government doesn't have money, their priorities are completely different. Government spending is needed. We've talked about it in the NEP episode also. Increase the spending of GDP to 10%. That's what you need to do. Right now, it's what between 3 to 6%, right? If you're not spending money, then people are only going to create things out of need and not because it is required.
But I think just barging in, I think it is not like the money is not there. Money is there with someone. It is not that money doesn't exist. So money is there. Maybe government has not doesn't have a lot of money for education per se because of the dwindling economy and everything. But it is not that India doesn't have people who have money, or let's say the space doesn't have it. Education space has money. The problem is, how do you take advantage out of it? How do you utilize it? How do you channelize it? What is your priority in terms of using? So if you are talking about PPP, for example, the only thing government does is privatize it. I don't understand privatization. I don't understand privatization. Doesn't solve anything. It only creates a whole load of problems. Why to privatize it? Don't give the handle to somebody. When you think of PPP, there's still something, because the government, I feel the government and the private has to go together, work together. Don't totally give it, privatize it and give it to someone else. Do it whatever way you want to. That doesn't solve the
That
problem.
is true. That is what the thing, and that is why I'm hopeful of using technology, because guess what? The India Stack is a Government of India initiative started in 2009. It has spanned and transcended different governments. None of them have stopped it. Maybe they created some small little hindrances, but it didn't stop. The internet is a gift to the world from US Department of Defense. The GPS is a gift to the world from US Department of Defense. So the government creates new technologies which are used by the private sector later on. Maybe we should have another discussion on that.
Yeah,
Ending it
because
on
we
a
are
good
overshooting
note.
time. Thank you everyone who has joined us and who will watch it later. uh,